So if I'm someone who's prone to defensiveness, one of the antidotes to defensiveness is to say, I can see some truth in what you're saying. Now, to anyone who gets defensive, you know that's like eating a piece of shit. I've never eaten a piece of shit, but it can't be good.
Relationship expert Mark Groves is returning with fresh insights on love and healing. As host of the Mark Groves podcast and co-author of Liberated Love, Mark has empowered millions with raw, transformative advice on relationships and emotional mastery. In this episode, he unpacks vulnerability cycles, shares tools for emotional regulation, and reveals how childhood patterns shape partnerships. It's a powerful conversation on turning conflict into growth, rebuilding trust, and fostering deeper bonds.
Because behind every criticism is actually a desired behavior. And behind every frustration we have in a relationship is an unmet emotional need. And so I said to her, look, I want to build a life. I want to build a family. I want to do it with you. If you don't want to do it with me, that's okay. I love you. But to be able to actually bring forward, allow the wound to be in the room. So the beauty of maturing and individuating in relationship, which is, I would say, almost everybody's work, is that your partner and you, I get asked a lot about, should I stay for the kids? Mm-hmm. That's a common, and I always say that's the wrong question. If you're going to stay or go, but if you're going to stay, do something about it.
Yeah.
And because we think there's this hierarchy that parents together is better than parents apart. Now, granted, probably the most ideal is parents together who are healthy. Parents apart who are healthy. Together or apart, unhealthy, high conflict.
Yeah.
Because and the reason I say this is because if I can say I'm going to use the tension between my wife and I as a vehicle for me to heal and her to heal and us to just become more powerful relating-wise. Because if you have a cycle from your childhood and then this cycle follows into your romantic relationship, sometimes it might look a little different. But every couple has a dance. When you do this, so when you get upset, I distance, which makes you more upset, which makes me distance more and shut down and leave. So in both of those is both a vulnerability. So the person who distances is maybe vulnerable to the intensity. The person who closes down that distance and gets more intense is vulnerable to space. Mm-hmm. And the person who distancing has a survival strategy, which is to walk away. And the person who elevates has a survival strategy to create conflict. But notice that the intensity feeds the vulnerability and the survival strategy. So the one survival strategy feeds the vulnerability and the other survival strategy feeds that vulnerability. It's called the vulnerability cycle. And everybody can make it through this. Everyone can learn how to meet a different part in that. And I see the sacredness of my relationship with my wife as being the thing. We are in the container that brings forward the exact medicine that both of us need individually and together. And so if I'm someone who's prone to getting defensive, for example, to bring in a little Gottman, right? The 4 horsemen, the 4 things that are most present in relationships that divorce. They're present in all relationships. It's just when they're in high volume. And they could predict with over 80% accuracy listening to the first 3 minutes of a couple fighting.
It's the craziest thing.
They get into 92%, I think.
Contempt, criticism.
Right? Defensiveness, and stonewalling.
Yeah.
And men tend to stonewall more. That just makes sense because men tend to be more avoidant because of the socialization, etc. We don't have as much training or teaching or socially acceptable. It's not as socially acceptable to be emotionally fluent and able to communicate feelings, which makes logical sense. So if I'm someone who's prone to defensiveness, one of the antidotes to defensiveness is to say, I can see some truth in what you're saying. Now, to anyone who gets defensive, that's like eating a piece of shit. I've never eaten a piece of shit, but it can't be good. It's
got to be better than what you just said.
Yeah. It's eating a diaper. Yeah, it's got to be better. Get me the spoon. Because when you finally say that, if you look at it from a pattern perspective, if every time in this example, my wife brings something forward to me and I get defensive, I'm so busy hitting back the ball that I'm not receiving it and hearing the wisdom because behind every criticism is actually a desired behavior. And behind every frustration we have in a relationship is an unmet emotional need. And so if we can actually get to like, what is the emotional need below the thing? So if my wife says like, you were late for dinner and you said you'd be home at this time and and I'll be like, oh, you want to talk about late? That's defensiveness.
Mm-hmm.
You want to talk, well, what about when you didn't? But if I say, I can see some truth in what you're saying. She might be like, what? I never heard this. But notice how I've likely softened her. And two, I'm in a conversation I've never had. So I'm moving beyond the upper limit of my communication style. And the depth of intimacy I'm capable of moves to a whole different place. I go from like replaying what I inherited to walking a path I've never witnessed. Because our defense strategies live beside our greatest wounds. So what lives beside your greatest wound is the love you desperately want. So they're next door neighbors. So you can't walk towards more sacred connection, more depth, more love without walking towards the thing that hurt you the most. Right? And what we normally do is we defend the thing that hurts us the most. And we put it in a box and maybe never look at it. But whenever you bury something, it just reroutes and gets stronger. So it just shows up in different ways. It shows up in more strategies to protect. But if you can actually ask the wound what you need to know, what skill set do you need to build, you can now walk towards it. And as you're doing that, you're walking towards depth. So when I started to orient to relationship from the material that's being brought forward is actually genius, divinely orchestrated, that we created the exact circumstances, which is so divine, but such also comes with a lot of painful fuckery, right? So let's like call that forward. Because if you place all your value in a relationship and someone leaves you, that is teaching you that your value doesn't live in a relationship. You know, and so all of it is divine. So if you have someone who walks away from you when you're upset or hurt and you're terrified of being rejected and abandoned, it's the exact medicine you need. So my wife and I started to look at love that way. Like when we were in our first relationship, we dated for 4 years, then broke up. And then came back together a year later, not planned, I was done when we first broke up. But when we were in that first relationship, there was always something holding her back from choosing me. And it was so hard for her to understand because she always wanted someone like me, someone who could communicate, who was curious about her world, and yet she didn't want it. Well, when I was 27, I was engaged to an incredible human who I didn't know why I didn't want her, but I just didn't want that relationship. And when we were standing in the kitchen, which is always where these conversations happen, she kept moving our deal breaker, which was when we were having kids. And I started in the second time she went to move it, I was like, you're moving something that's a deal breaker. And I recognize that people do that when they don't want to confront that they need the deal to break. And so I said to her, like, look, I want to build a life. I want to build a family. I want to do it with you. If you don't want to do it with me, that's okay. I love you. And that was always the conversation I wish someone had had with me when I was on the other side. But, you know, you're 20-something and you don't have the thought process of that, the emotional intelligence. You don't have the gift of your experiences. But I got to gift her back that. And I said, instead of us orienting to why you can't choose this from what's wrong with you that you can't, what happens if we said what's right with you that you can't? And that caused her to cry because she never thought about like, because a lot of people in a relationship, especially if you're a problem solver and you're someone who wants to fix people and you date addicts or you date people who are just can't get over something, they're underfunctioning, they don't book their own appointments, they don't adult, which is very common. And they pair perfectly with someone who does more of that than they should. Codependency, right? But what happens when someone needs a problem to solve is the other person always has to unconsciously have a problem. So they never get to full healing.
Totally.
And we get to blame them because we go, you're the one who's the fuck up. You're the one who's not reading. You're the one who's not listening. You're the one. But if you ever see this with an addict, they get sober and the other person starts to go bananas because they don't have a job anymore.
Hey guys, I want to share something brand new designed for high-performing men like you who want to win at home, not just at work. Our team developed this program over the past 8 years by collecting the best ideas, strategies, and habits from hundreds of men. It's all in one place to give you the best results in the shortest amount of time, because if you're a married man with kids and a business, there is no time to waste. This experience creates deep transformation, not just taking notes and talking about change. It's about doing what matters now so you don't miss the moments when your kids need you the most. These opportunities will come and go very quickly. It's also about building a marriage that shows your kids what real love looks like, creating an environment where they and you thrive. Look, marriage is tough. I've personally walked the line of divorce several times, and without the tools I've gained from this community, I might not be married today. And it's not just about being a great dad or a husband. It's about fulfilling your personal mission, thriving as a man, making an impact through your work, gaining time freedom, financial freedom, traveling the world, and giving to the causes you care about. This program is designed to keep you mentally, physically, and spiritually strong. You do not need to do this alone. Our badass community of intentional fathers are going to help you raise the bar. You're going to learn from each other, hold each other accountable, find your blind spots, and achieve success most dads will never see. It's time to dig deep, gain clarity, and create real change starting now. If you're ready to evolve, visit frontrowdads.com today. We've got limited spots available for this brand new program.
And so I had to start to see, like, look, I'm teaching relationship, I'm coaching relationship, I'm doing all these things. What a great thing that I'm in a relationship with someone who needs the exact skills I have. I'm like Taken, whatever his name is, Liam Neeson. I have a special set of skills. But I had to see, like, there's actually wisdom in it. Mm-hmm. And what was really interesting is she was about 92 to 99% in. But there was always the 1 to 8%. And I would say I was 100% in. But no one should ever be 100 with someone who's 99. Mm. So I was bypassing the very discernment.
Why is that?
Because if someone else is unsure about you, it instantly makes it so if you were in discernment choice, you would at least go, huh. Because your person must also think you're their person.
Yeah.
But a lot of us bypass that.
That's right.
Right? So the bypassing masquerades as altruism. It masquerades as a highly sensitive person. It masquerades as, I love all out. Mm-hmm. And I had to rein in my righteousness and be like, why am I loving all out? Because, of course, she can't trust me. Because she's going, this guy wants to choose me fully, but I'm telling him I'm not sure.
That's right.
So I can't be deeply rooted in truth because I'm bypassing the very reality that is conveniently my wound masquerading as certainty, if that makes sense.
One of the things I'm hearing, and I'm asking myself, like, what's the thread in a lot of what you're saying? Yeah. And what it feels to me is like this element of when we want to be in an incredible relationship, an element of that, it always comes back to perspective and being willing to look at the opposite side of something or flip it on its head but perspective is the word that comes to mind. Like when you were talking about this idea of saying, I can see truth in that.
Yeah.
That is, by the way, that's worth a trip to Vegas to hear that idea. There's like one thing that really hits you.
Yeah.
That thing. Because in that, by the way, I feel all of my defensiveness over the years and wanting to like prove a point and be right. Right?
Oh my God, that's
be heard.
Me. That's me too, yeah.
All of it to be heard. Like, but what about my point? Do you understand my point?
Yeah. You do know I'm right? Yeah.
But this idea of there's some truth in that and some validation for the other person and like giving them what I want them to give to me ultimately.
Yeah.
Right? So, and yet all of that comes back to like, am I willing to see this from a different angle? And a lot of our pain comes in our blind spot. Like, why am I even doing that? Our unconscious commitments to that.
Yeah.
I'm unconsciously committed to being in a relationship where, you have to have a problem so I can fix it.
Right.
Yeah. And when I'm unaware of that, It's the dance that is binding us.
I create problems.
I create problems because I need to solve them.
You can't have resolved them because if you don't have a problem, I'm not safe.
I remember this when I was younger about smoking. Like I was a smoker.
You were?
When I was younger,
oh,
yeah.
Wow. I used to chew tobacco.
I was a smoker. And I remember I would quit and people would be like, oh man, congratulations, you quit. So that felt really good. So you know what I would do? I would start smoking again so that I could then quit again and get more, attaboys for quitting smoking. And I became addicted to I love to quit smoking. So I have to start it so that I can quit it again.
Yeah.
I got to have something. I got to have a fight. I got to have a battle so that I can have, I realized this. I don't know if I've ever talked about this on the podcast too, is that as the leader of a men's group, I needed things to talk about at events. So I think I was unconsciously committed to creating problems at home that I could then solve and bring those stories to my events. Now that sounds weird to say now looking back. I don't think it's all that, because I think that there can be just problems because there's problems.
Right, there's life.
Right, there's just life. But I do think there's an element of that, of the energy that comes from I need a battle to fight. So if it's not there, I'm going to go find it. I'm going to be in pursuit of a battle. So I'm a warrior and I need to be at war in some way.
That makes sense. It's like, who am I without it?
That's right.
It was like I was teaching relationship, yet my relationship was ending, which because I felt uncomfortable about that, I went deeply into it, And people, when you're in public, people then have sort of they attach to the outcomes of your life. Because, I would hear a lot when we broke up, oh my God, if you two broke up, then I'm fucked, and I'm like, we're just two regular humans, who are, going through relationship.
What do you think about that, by the way, the people that are in the space of teaching relationship that aren't in a relationship?
When I first started writing, I wasn't in a relationship. And people would say to me, why would I listen to you?
Yeah.
You're not even in a relationship. And I would say, well, one, you don't have to. That's the beauty of it.
Yeah.
And two, that's under the premise that being in a relationship means you're good at them. That's not true. Oh, yeah. Yeah, because there's a lot of people, a lot of therapists, a lot of coaches who have totally fucked up lives.
Yeah.
And they preach or teach something that they don't live. And for me, I'm like, when I knew that when I hit publish on the very first thing I ever wrote, that I better get my poop in a group. I had to make sure that my integrity was in order. And actually, my writing became my accountability. It was the thing that mattered to me more than my bullshit, than my wounds, than my desire for short-term connection, which was really just, I had eroticized my pain. I was treating the fear of depth and connection by controlling it. And then I would get arousal from that and then, not have to be with the suffering I never processed. And so my writing and my work became kind of like an excising space of my shame, where I could do shame exorcisms. I would write about the thing I was ashamed of and what I learned from it. And that's really, I started to discover that the difference between oversharing and vulnerability is that oversharing is sharing something like, Brene Brown would say, they haven't earned the right to your story yet. And so we're trying to get something out of us that we don't know how to hold because we haven't processed it. We haven't done the alchemization process of turning our pain into something beautiful, into a change in our own behavior. So vulnerability is sharing what you learned. Oversharing is sharing it when it hasn't been processed yet.
Oh, this.
Yeah.
Let's talk about this for a second because I can see this in my relationship. So I still, to this very day, so please help me, Mark.
Yeah.
I struggle to this very day of do I bring my truth to Tatiana, which I can tell sometimes if I'm that's it, I'm just going to open up my heart and let her feel everything that's inside. And what's inside is dysregulation and panic and fear and the world is falling apart. And I bring that to her. I'm just being honest. I just want to be honest with my spouse. She immediately resonates with that. And she's dysregulated, right? That's what happens. So then I'm I can't tell her my truth. I can't tell her my truth. And then I hear this idea of processing, and I have a buddy who's my rule is I process privately, and then once I've processed it, I then bring it to my wife and say, I had this feeling, I was completely dysregulated. Here's what I realized about myself, and I'm okay now. And that's what I bring to my wife. Do you have strong feelings about either of those?
No. I think for women, they tend to be more verbal processors, but that I think now that men are navigating the world of emotion, now emotional processing is actually important too. And I think in relationship, if I was to bring something that, like I had an unprocessed reflection that I brought to my wife because I was like, I need your insight. Like, I love the way you see the world, and I'm not able to make these pieces make sense. I need what you know.
That feels different than what I was doing.
Yeah, like if I was upset about something that had something to do with her and I brought it forward in a dysregulated way, like a lot of the times we need the validation or the I'm very similar to you, so I'm like, but my point, right? It's good, right? Like you hear it, you see it, I'm right. Is because if she validates my world, then I'm safe.
Yeah.
Even though that's not true, and I've had to learn that a lot of like, just because someone doesn't agree with your perspective, seeking them to say it's true is still a child. And so can I actually, because you could even feel the wound and the need for it, right? You could feel that it's motivated by, if I just get this answer and she says this thing to me, we're good. And of course, our partner never gives us the thing we actually the wound, right? It's a natural process that our partner wounds us in a way that needs resolution till we resolve it, and then. So my reality doesn't need to be validated by anybody but myself. And that doesn't make it true. Do you know what I'm saying? So my experience is validated by me. It's like if I set a boundary with someone, a successful boundary isn't someone saying, great boundary, I'm totally going to do that. The success is in hearing your own voice. The success is in knowing you stood for yourself. And the success often is that someone might not be in your life. Work is that you're care about everybody else. It could feel really like a lot of guilt. And the other person can unconsciously leverage guilt in the relationship. This is why we always match so perfectly together. So as I pull out and start to express my needs, the other person who had no problem advocating for themselves has to actually create space for and safety for the person who's individuating. And so they don't even consciously know that they've hooked into the lack of standing for self. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Like my wife is her predisposition is to withdraw. She has no problem advocating for herself. Mm-hmm. I have a problem advocating for myself. Mm-hmm. So part of her participation in me expressing myself is I say, I need you to participate in this resolution and create safety and space for me, which means sometimes I need you to check in with me. Because it's my natural tendency to check in with her because she's a self. So her checking in with me is her building a bridge to me. As where normally I would just adapt, and shapeshift. So that's why I think like it's not just you're bringing too much and it's dysregulating your wife. The dance is that somehow your wife might have resistance to feelings from other people because then she doesn't get to feel her own, or maybe she feels responsible for their feelings. Mm-hmm. And I think you add a couple kids in there, and that's probably even amplified.
Hers is a shame of, I'm a bad person. So
because of you bringing something.
Yeah. So like if I bring something, she'll immediately figure out where she's falling short that would cause me to feel that way. So if I said, as an example, like, hey, I'm really stressed at work or money, like I 2 kids in private school, out that type of stuff, like I'm feeling a lot of stress of money, she'll immediately think, where am I overspending? I'm not making any money. I'm like, it's all immediately about where she's falling short. She's not enough. She's a bad person.
Goes right into shame.
Yeah, right into shame.
Yeah, which it is a normal process for people. Like when we have a low capacity to hold shame, it's normal for us to like go into the spiral, create. And shame in a way is very narcissistic in that it causes us to like feel lonely. No one else understands us. It causes us to create distance by design, right? Because if I'm close to you, then I might find out more of how I'm a deficit.
Yeah.
Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So if it was to be, the preface of that conversation could be like, hey, we know that sometimes you have this tendency to go into self-blame. This is ours, not yours. Mm-hmm. And so that starts to differentiate.
You mean when I said, this is about me, not you, that doesn't?
Yeah, right. This is me, not you. But to be able to actually bring forward, allow the wound to be in the room.
Yeah, that's right.
So that the wound is already ready, right? The wound's already like.
Allow the wound to be in the room.
Because the wound is already going, bring it. Like, this is what we know to do. I'm a fuck up.
Right.
I'm letting you down. So if we're like, hey, you have a predisposition to do that. Are you feeling it? Yeah, it's right there.
Yeah.
It's right there. Let it be there. How can I am the way I communicate in our exploration? Because what happens is it goes from like I and I to we're both having an experience, but what's the we? Mm-hmm. And that's the collective nervous system of your relationship.
Yeah, that's right.
Right? So it's like it goes from like dysregulation to the way you're entering it is actually regulated. And then you co-regulate, which is really beautiful.
On that note, you just put out a book, didn't you?
We did, yeah, in April.
Yeah, congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you.
Remind me of the name?
Liberated Love.
Liberated Love.
Yeah.
Co-authored between you and your wife.
Yeah.
Yeah. First project you've done together? A book project?
No,
First book project?
First book project,
okay, yeah. Well, congratulations, first of all. I saw a video of you two, and you were just beaming. You know, I could feel the pride and like the work that had been done that led to that book.
That was
So, congratulations.
Thank you.
So I hope people will check it out. And brother, I just want to say that your work is so important. I know you've created a massive impact. Your podcast is wildly successful. Your social media, where you're giving your thoughts and ideas and opening up to the world, is wildly successful. I also know that I'm just scratching the surface on who you are and your life story and all of that which you can bring. So I look forward to more and further conversations, whether they're in front of microphones or not. And also, I want you to know that I'd love to be a resource for you in your journey as a father. And anything I've ever learned, I wanna share with you, and just cheering you on from Austin, wherever your home ends up being permanently. But I do really appreciate how you've shown up today. I think this interview in particular, in my reflection, just got better and better and better and better. And there were a couple of moments here towards the end where I'm like, whoa, that is pure gold. And when I was with Cal the other day, Cal said, I got to go back and listen to some parts of this interview. And I just had the same thought. I was like, I can't wait to go back and listen to what you just shared, particularly in the last 15 minutes. My observation is you were absolutely in the flow, channeling the wisdom that you've gained in your 46 years on this planet. So honor you, thank you. And I hope people go check you out. So where do you want to send them?
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Thanks for trusting me with the dad squad. This is the front row dads. Yeah. No, I appreciate that. And for all of you listening, watching, like, so grateful that you traded time to hear me. That means so much. You can find me at markgroves.com. I have a community called Aligned, and all that's in there where all my courses are that are more like how to get through a breakup, dating, and how to step into your fullest self. And that community is, like-minded, and all the people who want to just be better. And podcast, wherever you find them, Mark Groves. And I have a Substack, actually, that I write now. Yeah? Which I write weekly, which has been, it's so nice to write long form again. And that's been a lot of fun. And so I explore, like, all the things in the world. I really believe that wherever you have tension, you have opportunity. And so, like, what wakes you up to a more fuller version of you is available through any friction. I just think the most frequent friction we have is relational. And so it's the most opportunity we have to, let's say, move towards what one might call self-actualization, which I think when you achieve, you get sent back into anyways. Like you get sent back to the beginners.
That's right,
manual.
of course.
So, no, I appreciate it. You can find me on all the places.
Awesome, man. Thanks for the combo today.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks for listening today, fellas. If you got value from this episode, I ask that you take 1 second right now and you share this with another dad in your life that you respect, that you know is committed to becoming a better man, family man, and businessman. And on that note, I want to honor you for choosing growth. Your family will thank you years from now for all the effort that you're putting in to learn the strategies so you can show up more fully for them today. Take care.